Good morning, everyone. Vice Chair Cleveland and Commissioner Wessel and the other distinguished members of the Commission. I'd like to thank you for inviting me today, and you've asked me to discuss the Chinese economy, the philosophical roots of China's economic system, and their implications for the United States. I've submitted to the Commission my written testimony, which is longer, and for fuller context of my verbal remarks here. My remarks today will focus on what makes the Chinese economy distinct, how it operates, and why it thrives under a monopolistic government that exploits and challenges the global free market system. I'll conclude with the possible possible actions for the United States to take. First, the peculiar and the paradoxical nature of the Chinese economy and the West's role in sustaining it. Unlike most other communist countries, most noticeably the Soviet Union, China has been afforded the benefits of a global free market system. It enjoys largely open access to international trade, capital markets, and advanced technologies. The paradox of a communist nation fully participating in a largely capitalist system has enriched and strengthened the Chinese Communist Party to the point where Beijing poses the mortal threat to the United States and to the very international free market economic system that has enabled the rise of the communist state. In a historic mea culpa, former President Richard Nixon admitted in his later years that his initiative to open up China in 1972 might have created a Frankenstein. China is ruled by the dictatorial communist government that controls the Chinese economy and exploits the global free market system. Today, we see this most clearly in the Chinese Communist Party's ability to exploit the huge supply of cheap and skilled labor at its disposal. This workforce does not have meaningful labor protection. It does not have the right to form and operate independent trade unions to exercise collective bargaining and welfare negotiations. In Xinjiang, the site of the tragic genocide against religious and ethnic minorities, workers were put into camps and have no rights at all. The CCP has created a gigantic country-sized sweatshop, and the world is buying. The party's exploitation does not end with human capital. The Leninist centralized model of governance also means it can command the nation's enormous material resources and effectively pursue the high capital demand landmark infrastructure projects, as in the Belt and Road Initiative. These include extensive highway and railway systems, wasteful and environmentally destructive housing and hydroelectric mega projects, and of course, expensive weapons of war in the conventional and nuclear arenas, as well as asymmetrical areas like space, cyber, deep sea, and biogenetics. The CCP's monopoly on power also allows Beijing to impose strict control over financial resources, forcing non-state businesses to rely on state financing and banking institutions. In a similar vein, the CCP is unrelenting on currency control and restrictions on currency flow, which makes foreign investors often unable to send profits out of China. This creates a vicious cycle where investors are left with no choice but to keep adding on more and more capital infusion into their Chinese investments. Foreign companies also face challenges in accessing to Chinese consumer market. The government-inspired and encouraged xenophobia makes many foreign brands victims of crazed national boycotts and mob hooliganism. While the advent of the Bitcoin age poses a challenge to all central banks, China views the digitalization of national currencies as an opportunity to increase its surveillance of its own people and to upend the US dollar-dominated global trade settlement and transactional monitoring system. It is taking ominous steps to explore that opportunity. China's currency control also severely restricts Chinese citizens' ability to send money abroad. This creates a destabilizing factor for the global currency system, including rampant money laundering activities. Well, the final point I'd like to make in this section is about information. Transparency is anathema to the Chinese Communist Party, including when it comes to economic data. It makes arbitrary economic growth objectives based on political impetuses rather than credible economic numbers. Lack of transparency also endangers American investors, as many of the Chinese state-owned enterprises listed on Western capital markets provide vague and opaque information, often keeping their financial records hidden from regulators and investors in free market economies. I'd like to close by answering a question that Vladimir Lenin would have asked: what is to be done? First and foremost, the United States should no longer ignore the enormous political and ideological differences between the Chinese Communist Party and the free world systems. A fully free market system of international trade cannot coexist peacefully with a socialist market economy with Chinese Communist Party characteristics. The first step I would recommend for the U.S. government to take is an item-by-item reciprocal response to China's negative list. That list is also known as Special Administrative Measures for Foreign Investment Access, and it constitutes a comprehensive list published annually by China's Development and Reform Commission that specifies all areas and sectors where foreign investments are allowed or not allowed in China. A reciprocal response would prohibit Chinese investments in the United States in areas such as high-quality agriculture seeds, social surveys, humanities and social science research institutions, critical minerals mining, news organizations, radio and television productions, film studios, cinemas and theater chains, and cultural performance troupes, etc., etc. The second step I would recommend is involves reciprocity for Americans' private companies. Congress could create a mechanism for them to register complaints about discrimination by China. The ban on Facebook and Twitter in China should not be a Facebook and Twitter problem, but an American problem. Based on this information, the U.S. government could take sovereign reciprocal actions against China. As it is, too many American companies are effectively held hostage by the CCP and resort to the permanent class of China lobbyists and registered agents for China, whose job is to sell whose job is to sell corporate America access to senior Chinese officials so that they can continue making big profits and not offending the CCP or autocrats, thus perpetuating America's corporate woes in a communist country. The third step, I think is the most important, is for America to once again recognize the importance of leadership. The economic challenge of the Chinese Communist Party is not a matter of if we should or should not change Beijing's paradoxical economic reality. It is a matter of if we don't change its behavior, the free world will be changed by Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party's inner circle is based on the understanding that China's struggle with America and the free world is nothing but a zero-sum game. In a world of geopolitical great power competition, the United States can and must win. And thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on this important topic, and I look forward to your questions and to working with the Commission.